Welcome to our presentation. It takes a village to manipulate the media coordinated link sharing behavior during 2018 and 2019 Italian election. This is research done by Fabio, Giglietto, Nicola, Righetti and Giada Marino from the University of Urbino and myself, Luca Rossi from the IT University of Copenhagen. The project was supported by a grant from Social Science Research Council, Facebook and Social Science One with the Social Media and Democracy Initiative. Today we're going to follow a pretty standard structure when it comes to the presentation. First we will introduce the theoretical frame, identify the problem, and introduce the idea of coordinated inauthentic behavior on social media. Then we will present our research questions, data and methods, and finally we'll present findings and describe what we see ahead of us in terms of future research. So working with problematic information has been at the center of researchers' attention for quite some time now, and it's a hard problem. It's hard because it's difficult to estimate the amount of problematic information and even more to estimate the impact or the effect that problematic information has on citizens. And even once we are able to see and identify something that we deem to be problematic information, how do we do that? We can rely on external fact checkers, we can rely on blacklists, we can rely on machine learning algorithms. All these strategies are being used and to some extent they work, but they also have a lot of problems in terms of scalability or in terms of the need they have to be constantly updated in order to be reliable. So for these reasons, platforms have been working with the idea of shifting the focus from identifying the specific piece of problematic information to identifying the behavior that leads to the propagation of problematic information. In a way, one could say that information is not actually problematic before it being spread and before it travels somewhere. So this is roughly the idea behind the concept of coordinated inauthentic behavior. That, of course, is a concept that contains two elements. One, the element of coordination, and on the other side, the element of inauthenticity. Coordination is when a set of entities coordinate their activity in order to maximize the spread of something or to maximize the effect of something. In this case, the spread of misinformation. And when they do so by concealing their identity, by pretending to be someone they are not, or by concealing their real goals, those two things combined define the coordinated inauthentic behavior. Our research focuses on a specific type of coordinated inauthentic behavior, that is coordinated link sharing behavior. Actually, this is a specific type of coordinated behavior rather than of coordinated inauthentic behavior, because coordinated link sharing behavior can be performed both by authentic and inauthentic entities. By coordinated link sharing behavior, we mean when a set of Facebook pages, groups, or other entities like verified profile, they act in a coordinated way in order to share and boost the reach of a specific news article or story. And they do that by sharing the same new link over a very short period of time. That will clearly gain the Facebook algorithm and will grant to that piece of news, to that link, a higher level of visibility. Of course, this is performed both by authentic and inauthentic entities, so the challenge in a way is how can we identify who is who, and then we can study these entities, because while they perform this behavior, they will leave traces on the social network platform, and we can collect those traces, so we can build networks and we can study these networks. So this leads us to the three research questions that we will use as an example for this type of research. First, we focus this research in the context of Italian political elections. We had two elections in Italy, one in 2018, a general election in 2019, the Italian part of the European election. So we asked ourselves if this coordinated network shared problematic content in the month preceding 2018 and 2019 Italian election. Then we also asked if political or non-political coordinated networks employ different link sharing strategies. And finally, we asked if there are structural differences in the networks emerging from political or non-political entities. Let's briefly talk about the data. First, we collected all the stories shared on Facebook in the 6 months leading to the elections. So one to the 2018 Italian general election, and the second period was for leading to the 2019 European election. Then, using CrowdTangle, we collected all the entities that shared within 7 days of the original publication those stories on Facebook. So first we had a data set of stories, and then we had a data set of entities that shared on Facebook and Instagram those stories, just for the period of 7 days after the story was published. That gave us 2 data sets, one for the 2018 data of more than 100,000 shares and more than 6,000 entities, and for the 2019 data, more than 120,000 shares and more than 8,000 entities. So the first problem that we had to address was how to identify coordinated behavior, because sharing on social media and social network sites is pretty common. So it's not that all the sharing that happens is coordinated. So the general strategy is to identify a time threshold and to say, well, we're going to identify this time threshold so that it is small enough that all the sharing that happens is nearly simultaneous. So it has to be the outcome of some kind of coordination. We weren't extremely happy with the idea of having a fixed threshold, so we decided to develop a method to estimate a dynamic threshold. That means that the actual threshold is based on the data that you are studying, instead of being just an arbitrary threshold that you decided. So what we did was first we studied and we measured all the difference between the first and the second share of any story, and we took the 10% fastest. And then we used the median time of those fastest shared stories, the median time that they needed in order to reach 50% of their shares. So that gives us 2 time thresholds, one 10 seconds for the 2018 data and one 23 seconds for the 2019 data. So, but in order to be really sure that we were only grasping what was actually coordinated behavior, we introduced an additional filter, if you want. So we only consider coordinated behavior only those that happened several times, that performed nearly simultaneous link sharing frequently. And by frequently, we mean above the 19th percentile of how many times those sharing behavior happened. So that gave us 2 results, one of 24 coordinated networks and 82 entities in 2018, and one of 92 coordinated networks and 600 entities in 2019. These methods are available. We decided to pack everything in an R package called Comet that, given a set of links that have been shared on Facebook, will detect if there was coordinated link sharing behavior and will provide as an output networks of entities that perform such behavior. The package is available online. You can use it if you're familiar with R, and just let us know how it works. So the first question is if these coordinated networks shared problematic content in the month preceding 2018 and 2019 Italian election. So we will always have 2 different results, one for the 2018 data and one for the 2019 data, but you will see that they are largely aligned. If possible, 2019 data are a little bit clearer and more evident. So the first question can be addressed in 2 different ways. First is if problematic domains are more likely to be shared by these coordinated networks, or if coordinated networks are more likely to share problematic domain. And by problematic domain, we mean domains that have been identified as sharing problematic information from Italian fact checkers. So we put a list of that in the slides. And the second is if problematic Facebook pages, as they have been identified by Havas, are more likely to be found in the coordinated networks. So the first, we have a solid yes to both research. In the first case, we see that using the risk ratio, we have a statistically significant difference in coordinated networks sharing problematic content. So we see that both in 2018 and 2019 data, problematic content is more likely to be shared by coordinated networks. And to the second part of this research question is an even more clear yes. Problematic entities, such as problematic Facebook pages, are more likely, always using the risk ratio, are more likely to be found in coordinated networks. So the problem is, what kind of networks are we talking about? Are those networks of political entities, let's say a Facebook page that is clearly defined as a political Facebook page, let's say from a political party or a political leader? Or do they conceal their nature under some kind of, I don't know, they might be entertainment, gossip, or any other kind of reason for a page to exist? So we have a little bit of everything here. We have both political networks that are composed only by political entities, networks that are composed only by non-political entities, and networks that are mixed, composed by political entities and non-political entities performing coordinated behavior. It's important to remember that if a page is part of one of these networks, they perform coordinated link sharing behavior several times. So there is a connection between those pages. What is interesting to observe is that we have several cases that we have identified in a qualitative way where political messages were shared together with non-political content. So the pages were, let's say, 80% non-political, but then from time to time they were sharing clearly political message, and political messages were often extremely one-sided. There is an interesting correlation between how clearly a political network is and the different type of domains that they share. So basically, the more explicit and self-declared political is the network, the lower share concentration are around few domains. So if you are clearly a political, you only share few domains. The third research question that we asked was if there was any possibility of identifying structural differences in the networks that were emerging from this coordinated behavior. The idea was, well, if you want to achieve coordination, you might design a different network strategy. You might design basically a clique where it's a network of pages that are all connected together, or you might design a highly centralized structure where you have a central hub and then a sort of star of network generated out of that. So we tested for those. So we tested using clustering coefficient on one side and centralization based on the degree on the other side, and we saw that the networks that we identified actually kind of clusters on both extremes. We have cases of networks that are highly clusterized, and basically they are cliques, and we have cases of networks that are highly centralized. But we couldn't connect this difference to their political nature or to any other element of those pages that we were able to identify. So this question remains kind of open or unsolved. So just to wrap this up, we proved that coordination, in order to be effective, leaves traces online, and we can use these traces to detect networks of pages performing this type of behavior. Of course, this can be used from newspapers, journalists, researchers, fact checkers in order to keep the list of coordinated entities updated. Details about this research is available on a recently published paper that has the same title as this presentation on information, communication, and society. Thank you very much.